The dust swirled around Penelope Sullivan's worn boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Unionville, Nevada. Her heart hammering against her ribs as three ranch hands standing outside the Silver Spur Saloon burst into laughter at the sight of her hefty frame struggling with her single weathered trunk. It was June 1876, and the desert town shimmered under the relentless sun, a collection of wooden buildings that had sprouted up around the silver mines. Penelope had traveled all the way from St. Louis after answering an advertisement for a ranch cook, her last precious dollars spent on the journey west. At 24 years old, she had nothing left to lose. Her parents had died of fever the previous winter, and the boarding house where she had worked as a cook let her go when the owner's nephew needed employment. The West promised opportunity, or so she had told herself during the long, uncomfortable journey. "Look at the size of her," one of the ranch hands called out, elbowing his companion. "She will eat more than she cooks." "Maybe she is applying to be one of the cattle," another one added, and their cruel laughter followed her down the dusty main street. Penelope kept her chin up, though heat flooded her cheeks. She had heard worse. Her entire life had been marked by such comments, strangers and acquaintances alike feeling entitled to comment on her round face, her thick arms, her generous figure. She had learned long ago that responding only encouraged them. Instead, she focused on finding the address listed in the advertisement: the Enders Ranch, proprietor Russell Enders. The general store owner, a kindly older woman with silver hair pinned in a neat bun, gave her directions. "The Enders place is about 3 miles north of town. Russell is a good man, fair and honest. Lost his wife 2 years back to consumption. He has been trying to keep that ranch running with just himself and a handful of cowboys, but they need proper meals. The last cook quit after a month because the work was too hard and the isolation too much." "Thank you, madam," Penelope said softly. "Is there a wagon I might hire to take me out there? Old Pete usually does runs for a quarter. You will find him by the livery stable. Tell him Martha sent you." The ride to the Enders Ranch gave Penelope time to observe the harsh Nevada landscape. Sagebrush dotted the dusty earth, and distant mountains rose purple against the bright sky. It was so different from Missouri, so much emptier and wilder. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake, traveling so far on nothing but hope and desperation. The ranch itself was larger than she had expected. A sprawling house with a wide porch stood beside a massive barn, and several smaller outbuildings dotted the property. Corrals held horses that whinnied and tossed their heads in the heat. She could see men working in the distance, moving cattle from one pasture to another. Old Pete helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk to the porch. "Good luck to you, miss. Mr. Enders is a decent sort, which is rare enough out here." A man emerged from the barn before Penelope could knock on the door. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair needed cutting, and a few days of stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore typical ranch clothing: denim pants, a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a bandana around his neck, and scuffed boots. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep brown and surprisingly gentle when they met hers. "Can I help you?" His voice was low and pleasant, without the mocking tone she had grown accustomed to. "I am Penelope Sullivan. I came about the cook position." She kept her voice steady, professional. "I answered your advertisement in the St. Louis newspaper." Russell Enders studied her for a long moment, and Penelope braced herself for dismissal. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You traveled a long way. I am Russell Enders. I own this place." He glanced at her trunk. "You have references?" "Yes, sir." She fumbled in her reticule for the letters she had carefully preserved. I worked at the Riverside boarding house for 6 years. Before that, I helped my mother run a small restaurant. He took the letters but did not read them immediately. Can you cook for 15 men? Breakfast before dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at sundown. It is hard work and the men eat like horses. I can do it, sir. I am used to hard work. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You would have your own cabin back behind the main house. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private. Sundays you get the afternoon off after lunch is served. $30 was more than she had made at the boarding house. That sounds fair. Russell finally unfolded one of the letters and read it. His eyebrows rose slightly. Mrs. Henderson says you are the best cook she ever employed, and she deeply regretted having to let you go. She was kind to say so. Says here you can do everything from basic beans to fancy city cooking, that you never waste food and you keep a spotless kitchen. I do my best, sir. He looked up at her again, and something in his expression softened. The truth is, Miss Sullivan, you are the only person who has responded to that advertisement in 2 months. The isolation does not suit most folks, but I need someone who can do the work and stick around. My men are getting tired of burned biscuits and undercooked beans. Who has been cooking? Me, when I have time. Otherwise, the men take turns and none of them have the knack for it. He folded the letter and handed it back. I will give you a trial period. 1 month. If it works out, the job is yours for as long as you want it. Relief flooded through her. Thank you, Mr. Enders. You will not regret it. Come on, I will show you the kitchen and your cabin. He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and led her toward the house. The kitchen was large, with a substantial cast iron stove, a wooden table for preparation, and shelves lined with supplies. A pump stood over a deep sink, and pots and pans hung from hooks on the wall. It was better equipped than she had dared hope. The supply wagon comes once a week from town, Russell explained. You give me a list of what you need, and I make sure you get it. We have chickens for eggs, a milk cow, and a vegetable garden out back that could use some attention. We also butcher our own beef and pork. This is wonderful, Mr. Enders. I can do a lot with this. He led her outside and across the yard to a small cabin nestled under a cottonwood tree. Inside was a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, a small table, and 2 chairs. A window looked out toward the mountains. It was sparse but infinitely better than the cramped attic room she had shared with 2 other girls at the boarding house. I will let you get settled, Russell said, setting her trunk down. Supper is usually at 6. Think you can manage something for tonight? Absolutely. What do you have on hand? Salt pork, beans, flour, some potatoes, and onions. Not much else at the moment. I will make it work. She smiled at him, genuinely grateful. Thank you again, Mr. Enders. You are giving me a real chance, and I appreciate it more than you know. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Everyone deserves a chance, Miss Sullivan. I will send one of the boys to help you carry water if you need it. After he left, Penelope sat on the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. She had done it. She had traveled across half the country and found employment. She had a roof over her head and the promise of steady work. The laughter of those men in town still stung, but Russell Enders had looked at her with respect, not mockery. That was more than she usually received. She washed her face and changed into her work dress, then headed to the kitchen to assess what she had to work with. The pantry was indeed poorly stocked, but she had worked with less. She found the salt pork and set it to rendering, chopped onions and potatoes, and started a large pot of beans that had been soaking. There was enough flour and lard to make biscuits, and she mixed the dough with practiced efficiency. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, men began drifting toward the house. Penelope had set the long dining table and prepared to serve. She felt their eyes on her as they filed in, heard the whispers and muffled laughs. Her face heated, but she kept her head high and began bringing out the food. The first man to taste her cooking was a grizzled cowboy with a gray mustache. He took a bite of the beans, then another. His eyebrows rose. These are actual beans cooked right, with flavor and everything. Another man tasted the salt pork and potatoes. Lord have mercy, this is real food. The biscuits drew actual sighs of pleasure. Penelope felt her shoulders relax slightly. Whatever they thought of her appearance, they could not fault her cooking. Russell was the last to enter. He had washed up and changed his shirt. He took his seat at the head of the table and served himself, then tasted the beans. His eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, he looked directly at her. "Miss Sullivan, this is excellent. Best meal we have had in months." "Thank you, sir. Please eat something yourself. You have earned it." She had been planning to eat in the kitchen, but his invitation was clearly genuine, so she filled a small plate and sat at the far end of the table. The men were too busy eating to pay her much attention now, and for that she was grateful. After dinner, she cleaned up while the men dispersed to the bunkhouse or their evening chores. Russell lingered, drying dishes as she washed them. "You do not need to help, Mr. Enders. My mother raised me to be useful. Besides, I wanted to tell you that you have a real gift." That was the best meal I have had since my wife passed. The mention of his late wife hung in the air. "I am sorry for your loss," Penelope said quietly. "Thank you. Sarah was a good woman. She loved this ranch almost as much as I do." He was silent for a moment. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said you could tell a person's character by how they treat work. You have a good work ethic." "Work is all I have ever known," Penelope admitted, "but I do not mind it. There is satisfaction in doing something well. I noticed you have a gentle hand with things. The way you kneaded that biscuit dough, the care you took with setting the table. It is not just cooking to you, is it?" She looked at him, surprised. "Most people never notice such things." "I suppose not. I believe in treating everything with respect, even simple tasks. My mother taught me that." "Smart woman, your mother." They finished the dishes in companionable silence, and Russell bid her good night. Penelope walked back to her cabin under a sky blazing with stars, more stars than she had ever seen in the city. The air had cooled, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. It was strange and wild and beautiful. That night, despite her exhaustion, she slept better than she had in months. The next morning, Penelope rose before dawn and made her way to the kitchen in the dark. She had learned the routine quickly. Coffee first, strong and hot, then biscuits and bacon and eggs and fried potatoes. The men needed substantial food to fuel a long day of physical labor. As she worked, she heard the ranch coming to life around her. Horses whinnying, men calling to each other, the creak of the barn door opening. By the time gray light appeared in the east, breakfast was ready. The men filed in, still half asleep, and filled their plates. The young one named Tommy, who could not have been more than 19, smiled at her shyly. "Morning, Miss Sullivan. Something smells mighty fine." "Good morning, Tommy. Help yourself." Russell came in last again, his hair damp from washing. He filled a plate and ate standing at the counter, clearly in a hurry. "Miss Sullivan, we are moving the herd to the north pasture today. We will be gone until late afternoon. Can you manage lunch without help, of course? I will have something ready when you return. There is a bell outside the kitchen door. Ring it at noon, and whoever is around will come in to eat." After breakfast, she cleaned up and began planning the day's meals. She explored the vegetable garden Russell had mentioned and found it sadly neglected but still producing. She harvested tomatoes, squash, and some herbs that had gone half wild. There was potential here if someone tended it properly. She spent the morning cooking and baking, preparing not just for today but for the days ahead. She made several loaves of bread, a large pot of stew, and 2 apple pies from dried apples she found in the pantry. When noon came, she rang the bell and served lunch to the 4 men who had stayed behind to work on repairs around the ranch. One of them was the cowboy who had mocked her in town. His name was Jake, and he avoided her eyes as he ate. Penelope said nothing, just served the food and let her cooking speak for itself. In the afternoon, she tackled the vegetable garden. She pulled weeds, watered the plants, and took stock of what was growing. With proper care, this garden could provide a steady supply of fresh produce, which would improve the meals considerably and save money. She was bent over a row of beans when a shadow fell across her. She looked up to find Russell standing there, holding his hat in his hands. "The men told me you have been working in the garden. I hope that is all right. It seemed a shame to let it go to waste." "More than all right. Sarah planted that garden our first year here, and I have not had the heart to tend it properly since she died. I am glad to see it being cared for again." Penelope wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt. "It is a good garden. With attention, it could provide a lot." "You have dirt on your face," Russell said, and to her surprise, he smiled. It transformed his serious features, making him look younger. She laughed and tried to wipe it away. "Occupational hazard. Here." He pulled his bandana from around his neck and stepped closer, gently wiping the dirt from her cheek. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Penelope froze, her breath catching. His hand stilled and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Russell stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should let you get back to it. Just wanted to check on you." "I am doing fine, Mr. Enders. Thank you." He nodded and walked away quickly, leaving Penelope standing in the garden with her heart beating strangely fast. The days fell into a rhythm. Penelope rose before dawn, cooked 3 substantial meals a day, and spent her free time improving the garden and experimenting with recipes. The men's initial skepticism turned to genuine appreciation. Even Jake stopped making snide comments, though he still would not meet her eyes. Russell was a constant, quiet presence. He helped her carry water, fixed a loose board on her cabin steps, and brought her fresh vegetables from town when the supply wagon came. Their conversations grew longer and more comfortable. He told her about the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd and building something lasting. She told him about her parents, about St. Louis, about her love of cooking. "Why did you come west?" he asked one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I did not have anything keeping me in Missouri anymore. After my parents died, I felt unmoored. The West seemed like a place where I could start fresh, where maybe my past would not matter so much." "People can be cruel," Russell said quietly. "I heard what those men said when you arrived in town." Penelope stiffened. "You were there. I was picking up supplies. I saw the whole thing." He turned to look at her. "I almost said something, but you held your head so high, walked away with such dignity, that I figured you did not need me fighting your battles. I have learned that responding only makes it worse. That is probably wise, but it does not make it right." He paused. "For what it is worth, I think you are beautiful." The words hung in the air between them. Penelope felt heat flood her face. "Mr. Enders, Russell, please call me Russell. Russell, you do not need to say things you do not mean to make me feel better." "I do not say things I do not mean." His voice was firm. "You have a beautiful smile, kind eyes, and a gentle heart. That matters more than anything else." Tears pricked at Penelope's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Penelope felt something shifting between them, something fragile and precious that she was afraid to name. One morning in late July, Penelope was kneading bread dough when she heard shouting from outside. She hurried to the window and saw several men gathered near the barn, their voices raised in argument. Russell stood in the center, his posture tense. She wiped her hands and stepped outside, concerned. As she approached, she could hear Jake's angry voice. "It is not right, boss. Having that woman here, she is eating us out of house and home." "She is doing her job," Russell said, his voice dangerously quiet, "better than any of you ever did. But look at her. She is huge. She must be eating half of what she cooks." Penelope felt as if she had been slapped. She stopped walking, wanting to retreat but frozen in place. Russell took a step toward Jake. "You want to repeat that?" "I am just saying what everyone is thinking." "No, you are saying what you are thinking, and it is the stupidest thing I have ever heard." Russell's voice rose. "Miss Sullivan works harder than anyone on this ranch. She is up before all of you and she goes to bed after you do. She has turned this kitchen around, planted a garden, saved us money, and improved morale. And you have the gall to stand here and insult her. Boss, I did not mean—" "Yes, you did. And I am tired of it." Russell looked around at the other men. "Anyone else have something to say about Miss Sullivan?" Silence. The men looked at their boots. "That is what I thought. Jake, you can collect your pay and be off this ranch by noon." Jake's face went red. "You are firing me over this." "I am firing you because you are a bully and a fool, and I do not employ either. Now get your things." Jake stomped off toward the bunkhouse, cursing under his breath. The other men dispersed quickly, leaving Russell standing alone. He turned and saw Penelope, and his expression softened into concern. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Her voice shook slightly. "You did not need to fire him on my account." "Yes, I did. I should have done it when you first arrived," and he laughed. Russell walked toward her. "Penelope, I will not tolerate anyone mistreating you, not here. This is your home too." The use of her first name, the fierce protectiveness in his voice, made something crack open inside her. "Why do you care so much?" He was close now, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Because you matter to me. These past weeks, having you here, it has changed everything. This house feels like a home again, and it is not just the good food or the clean kitchen. It is you. Your kindness, your humor, the way you care about everything you do. I look forward to every conversation, every smile. You have become important to me, Penelope, and I cannot stand by while someone hurts you." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Russell, I am not the kind of woman men usually. You are exactly the kind of woman I want. The only kind. Someone real and good and genuine." He reached out and gently took her hand. "I know it has not been that long, and maybe it is too soon, but I need you to know how I feel. You have brought light back into my life." "I feel it too," she whispered. "I was afraid to even hope, but I feel it too." His smile was brilliant. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. "Then we will figure this out together." The summer passed in a golden haze. Russell and Penelope did not hide their growing affection, though they were careful to maintain propriety. They sat together in the evenings, talking for hours. He showed her the ranch, teaching her to ride a gentle mare named Daisy. She cooked his favorite meals and left little surprises for him. Fresh cookies on his desk, wildflowers in a jar in the barn. The men saw the change in their boss and adjusted accordingly. No one dared make another disparaging comment about Penelope. In fact, several of them started treating her with genuine respect and even affection. Tommy appointed himself her unofficial helper, carrying water and chopping wood without being asked. In August, a traveling preacher came through Unionville. Russell asked Penelope to accompany him to the Sunday service in town. It was the first time they had appeared together in public, and Penelope felt every eye on them as they walked into the small church. After the service, Martha from the general store approached with a warm smile. "Miss Sullivan, how good to see you. You are looking well." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. The ranch suits me. I can see that." Martha glanced at Russell with approval. "Mr. Enders, you are looking happier than I have seen you in years." "I have reason to be," Russell said simply, and placed his hand on the small of Penelope's back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. They had lunch at the hotel restaurant, a rare treat. Over roast chicken and potatoes, Russell became serious. "Penelope, I want to ask you something important." Her pulse quickened. "All right. These past months with you have been the happiest I have had in years. You have made that ranch into a real home. More than that, you have made me remember what it is to feel joy." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I know it has not been very long and maybe I should wait, but I am not a young man anymore and I know what I want. I want you. I want you beside me as my partner and my wife. I want to build a life with you, to wake up every morning knowing you are there. Will you marry me, Penelope?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes, Russell, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her to her feet, then kissed her right there in the middle of the restaurant to the applause of the other diners. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "I do not have a ring yet," he said. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I spent the money. I do not need a fancy ring, I just need you." "You will have both," he promised. "We will go to the jeweler right now." The ring he bought her was simple, a gold band with a small diamond that caught the light. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, making plans. They would marry in September, before the weather turned. It would be a simple ceremony, just the ranch hands and a few friends from town. Penelope would make the wedding supper herself. "Are you sure you want to cook at your own wedding?" Russell asked, amused. "I am positive. It would not feel right any other way." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind. Penelope sewed a new dress, cream-colored muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Russell spruced up the house, painting the trim and fixing anything that needed repair. The men pitched in enthusiastically, clearly happy for their boss. Tommy confided to Penelope one evening, "I have never seen Mr. Enders smile so much. My own ma passed when I was young and my pa never recovered. But Mr. Enders, he is proof that love can come again. That is something special." "He is something special," Penelope agreed. The wedding took place on a perfect September morning, with the air crisp and clear, and the mountains brilliant in the distance. The preacher came out to the ranch, and they were married in the garden that Penelope had brought back to life. She wore wildflowers in her hair that Russell had picked himself that morning. When he saw her walking toward him, his eyes went bright with tears. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he whispered as she took his hands. The vows were simple and heartfelt. When Russell kissed her as his wife, the assembled guests cheered. The wedding supper was a feast. Roasted beef, fresh vegetables from the garden, bread still warm from the oven, and a 3-layer cake that Penelope had secretly made the day before. As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Russell took Penelope's hand and led her to the house, to the bedroom they would now share. He was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, he held her close. "I love you, Penelope Enders." She smiled at the sound of her new name. "I love you too, Russell. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing past everything else to who I really am. You make that easy. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Life as Mrs. Enders was everything Penelope had never dared dream of. She still cooked for the ranch hands, but now she also managed the household, worked alongside Russell in planning for the future, and became his true partner in every sense. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Penelope's careful household accounting and efficient meal planning saved money that Russell put back into buying more cattle and better equipment. That winter was harsh, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping below zero. But the house was warm and full of love. On Christmas Eve, Russell gave Penelope a beautiful shawl he had ordered from a catalog, soft blue wool that matched her eyes. She gave him a new leather-bound ledger she had made herself, with his initials tooled into the cover. "I am working on another gift," she told him shyly. "But it will not be ready until summer." "What is it? A baby?" She watched his face, nervous and excited. "I am almost certain." Russell's expression went through several emotions at once: shock, joy, wonder, fear. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby, we are having a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. Penelope, you have given me everything. A home, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Penelope continued her work as long as she could, though Russell fussed over her constantly. The men treated her like precious china, rushing to help with any task. Tommy especially took it upon himself to be her shadow, carrying anything heavy and fetching whatever she needed. In early July 1877, on a hot afternoon when the air shimmered with heat, Penelope's labor began. Martha came out from town to help, along with a midwife named Mrs. Chen who had experience delivering babies. Russell paced outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next morning. But finally, as the sun rose over the mountains, a baby's cry filled the air. Mrs. Chen emerged with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Enders. A big, healthy boy." Russell burst into the room and found Penelope propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She smiled at him through tears. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, as if in a dream, and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already waving his small fists. Something shifted in Russell's chest, a love so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Russell whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Penelope, thank you for this." They named him James Russell Enders after Russell's father. Jamie, they called him, and he became the center of their world. Penelope had never known such joy. Watching Russell with their son, seeing the gentleness with which he held the baby, the wonder in his eyes, made her fall in love with him all over again. The ranch hands doted on Jamie. Tommy carved him toys, and even the gruffest cowboys would stop to make faces at the baby and grin when he smiled. The house rang with laughter and life. As Jamie grew from infant to toddler, Penelope found her rhythm balancing motherhood with her other responsibilities. She hired a young woman from town, Sarah Parker, to help with some of the cooking and cleaning. Sarah was 18, eager to learn and grateful for the work. She adored Jamie and often watched him while Penelope worked. When Jamie was 2, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy felt easier despite chasing after an active toddler. In the spring of 1879, they welcomed a daughter. She was smaller than Jamie had been, with Russell's brown eyes and Penelope's blonde hair. "What should we call her?" Russell asked, holding his daughter with the same awe he had shown with Jamie. "What about Sarah, after your late wife? I know she would have loved these children." Russell looked at her with such love it took her breath away. "You would do that, honor her that way. She was your first love and she made you the man you are. Our children should know about her. Besides, it is a beautiful name." So their daughter became Sarah Penelope Enders, called Sally. She was a peaceful baby, content to watch the world with her big eyes. Jamie was fascinated by his little sister and appointed himself her protector. The years passed in a blur of happiness. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Russell added more land, hired more men, and built a larger barn. Penelope's kitchen became famous in the county, and she sometimes sold her baked goods in town to raise money for the new school being built. Jamie grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work. Sally was quieter but just as determined, and she had a gift with animals. By the time she was 5, she could gentle the wildest horse with patience and soft words. In 1883, when Jamie was 6 and Sally 4, Penelope gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas after Tommy, who had become like family. Tommy himself had married Sarah Parker the year before, and they lived in a small house on the edge of the ranch property. Tommy had proven himself invaluable, and Russell made him foreman. Life was not without challenges. There were droughts that tested them, cattle rustlers they had to guard against, and the occasional illness that swept through. But through it all, Penelope and Russell faced everything together, their love only growing stronger. On their 10th anniversary, Russell took Penelope back to the garden where they had married. The children were with Tommy and Sarah for the evening, giving them rare time alone. "Do you remember standing here 10 years ago?" Russell asked, holding both her hands. "Every detail. It was the happiest day of my life. Mine too. Though I have to say, every day since has been pretty wonderful." He pulled her close. "I have been thinking a lot lately about the day you arrived. How scared you looked, but how brave. How those men laughed and how you held your head high. I almost sent you away, you know." Penelope pulled back to look at him in surprise. "You did? For about 5 seconds. I thought maybe you would not be able to handle the work. But then I read your references and saw the determination in your eyes, and I knew you were special. I did not realize then that I was looking at my future wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life. But some part of me must have known, because I could not let you go. I was so grateful you gave me a chance. So many people had already decided I was not worth their time. Their loss was my gain. And I thank God every day that you answered that advertisement, that you were brave enough to come west, that you gave me a chance too. You were always easy to love, Russell Enders." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, in the garden surrounded by the flowers she tended and the vegetables that fed their family. In the distance, they could hear their children's laughter carrying on the evening breeze. As they stood there, Penelope thought about how far she had come. From the lonely girl stepping off the stagecoach, braced for rejection, to this. A woman beloved, a mother, a partner, a home. She had been terrified that the West would be just another place where she did not fit. Instead, she had found exactly where she belonged. The years continued to unfold in a rich tapestry of ordinary moments and extraordinary love. Jamie grew tall and strong like his father, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch responsibilities. Sally surprised everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to be a veterinarian. An unusual ambition for a young woman, but one her parents supported wholeheartedly. Thomas, the baby, turned out to have inherited his mother's gift for cooking and announced he wanted to open a restaurant someday. Russell and Penelope watched their children grow with pride and joy. They also watched their ranch become one of the most successful in Nevada, known not just for the quality of cattle but for the fair treatment of workers and the strong sense of community Russell and Penelope fostered. On Penelope's 40th birthday, the whole town of Unionville came out to the ranch for a celebration. She had become beloved in the community, not just as Russell Ender's wife, but in her own right. She had organized a women's charitable society that helped families in need. She taught cooking classes for young brides. She always had a kind word and a listening ear for anyone who needed it. As she stood on the porch watching the party spread across the yard, Russell came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Happy birthday, my love." She leaned back against him. "Thank you for all of this. You deserve a party every day for the rest of your life. I do not need parties, I just need this. You, our children, this life we built together." Do you ever think about that first day? When you were so nervous and I was so desperate for a cook? Sometimes it feels like another lifetime, like that scared girl was someone else entirely. She was not someone else. She was you, just waiting to bloom, and bloom you did. He kissed the side of her neck. "I have a present for you." "Russell, you have already given me too much. Never too much." He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a locket on a delicate chain. When she opened it, she found tiny photographs of their 3 children. "Oh, Russell, it is beautiful. Turn it over." Engraved on the back were the words, "To P, who taught me to see with my heart, all my love are." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you so much. I love you too. More than words can ever say." They stood there together, watching their children play with the other young people, watching their friends and neighbors enjoy the celebration. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold. Years later, when Penelope was in her 60s and her hair had gone silver, she would still cook every Sunday dinner for the family. Jamie had married a wonderful woman named Clara and given them 4 grandchildren. Sally had indeed become a veterinarian, the first female veterinarian in Nevada, and worked alongside her husband, who was a rancher. Thomas had opened a restaurant in Carson City that became famous throughout the state, and he credited his mother with teaching him everything he knew. Russell's hair had also gone silver, and his movements were slower, but his love for Penelope had never dimmed. They still sat together on the porch every evening, still held hands when they walked through the garden, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt those first months of falling in love. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Penelope said, "Do you remember what those men said when I first arrived? That I would eat more than I cooked?" Russell made a disgusted sound. "I try not to think about such stupidity. I am not upset about it anymore. I am just thinking about how wrong they were, not just about the eating, but about everything. They thought they knew who I was based on how I looked. They decided I had no value, their loss, but my gain. Because if everyone had accepted me, if I had been pretty and petite and conventional, I might have stayed in St. Louis. I might have married some clerk and lived a perfectly ordinary life. Instead, their rejection pushed me west to you, to this life, to a love greater than I ever imagined." Russell squeezed her hand. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow, that the universe would have made sure of it, maybe, but I am grateful for the path I took, hard as it was. Every rejection, every cruel word, every moment of loneliness led me here. And here is where I was always meant to be. Here is where you will always be, by my side in my heart for the rest of my days." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found in each other everything they had been searching for. A home, a partner, a love that had weathered all storms and only grown stronger. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Jamie was now running the ranch full-time, his own children growing into capable hands. Sally had written a book about veterinary medicine that was being used in schools across the West. Thomas had opened a second restaurant and was training his own children in the culinary arts. The party was enormous, with people coming from all over the state to celebrate Russell and Penelope. A photographer came from Carson City to take a portrait of the whole family. In the photograph, Russell and Penelope sat in the center, surrounded by their children's spouses, and their 9 grandchildren. Everyone was smiling, and Russell's hand rested on Penelope's shoulder in his familiar, protective way. At the end of the night, after all the guests had gone home and the grandchildren had been put to bed, Russell and Penelope walked out to the garden one more time. The moon was full, casting silver light over the plants and flowers. 50 years, Penelope marveled. Half a century together. Best 50 years of my life, though I am greedy enough to want 50 more, she laughed. We would both be well over 100 years old. Worth it to spend the time with you. They stood in the place where they had married, where they had shared countless conversations, where their children had played and their grandchildren now ran. The garden had changed over the years, expanding and evolving, but it remained the heart of the property, the place where their love story had truly begun. "You know what I remember most about our wedding day?" Penelope asked. "Tell me." "The look on your face when you saw me walking toward you. Like I was the answer to every question you had ever asked. Like I was precious and wonderful and exactly what you had been waiting for. No one had ever looked at me like that before. I still look at you like that, every single day. I know, and I still cannot quite believe my luck. Our luck. We found each other, Penelope. Against all odds, we found each other." They kissed under the moonlight, husband and wife, partners and best friends, 2 souls who had recognized each other and held on tight through everything life brought. Russell lived to be 78 years old and Penelope 76. They died within months of each other, Russell first, in his sleep, and Penelope following soon after, as if she could not bear to be without him for long. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together their first year of marriage. At Penelope's funeral, Jamie stood to speak about his mother. His voice was thick with emotion but steady. "My mother taught me many things. How to be kind, how to work hard, how to see the value in people others overlook. But most of all, she taught me about love. The love she and my father shared was the foundation of our family. It was not the kind of love you see in storybooks, perfect and easy. It was real love, built on respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day. She could have been bitter about the way the world treated her. Instead, she was generous. She could have been angry. Instead, she was gentle. She took every hardship and transformed it into strength. My father used to say that marrying my mother was the smartest thing he ever did. But I think it was the bravest thing too. Because he had to be brave enough to see past what others saw, to recognize the treasure that was right in front of him. And she had to be brave enough to trust him, to believe that he truly saw her. They built a life together that touched everyone who knew them. This ranch, this family, this community, all of it exists because they loved each other well. And that is the legacy they leave behind. The church was packed with people whose lives had been touched by Penelope and Russell. Former ranch hands, now old men themselves, who remembered Penelope's kindness. Women she had helped through hard times. Young people she had mentored. The entire town of Unionville had turned out to pay their respects. After the service, the family gathered at the ranch. Sally had brought her children and grandchildren. Thomas had closed his restaurants for the day so his whole staff could attend. They stood together in the garden, now tended by Jamie's wife, and shared memories. "Grandmother always said the garden was where everything began," one of the grandchildren said. "She told me once that a garden is like love. It needs attention and care, and sometimes you have to pull out weeds, but if you tend it right, it will feed you for a lifetime." That sounds like her, Sally said, wiping tears from her eyes. Everything was a lesson. Everything meant something. She never wasted a moment or a word. Grandfather was the same, Thomas added. He taught me that actions matter more than words, that how you treat people when no one is watching tells you who you really are. That love is not a feeling, it is a choice you make every day. As the sun set over the mountains one more time, the family stood together in the garden, honoring the two people who had built this legacy. The garden that had nearly died but was brought back to life. The ranch that had been just a business but became a home. The love story that had started with laughter and mockery but ended in devotion and respect. Somewhere in the fading light, if you believed in such things, you might have seen two figures standing hand in hand, watching their family with pride and joy. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. Two hearts that had beat as one for 50 years and would continue to do so for eternity. The heavy girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Unionville, Nevada, in 1876, scared and alone, had found not just a job but a destiny. The cowboy who had seen past her appearance to her gentle heart had found not just a cook but a soulmate. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the transformative power of love that sees truly, loves deeply, and endures forever. And in the years that followed, their descendants would continue to gather in that garden, telling and retelling the story of Russell and Penelope. The story of how love can bloom in the unlikeliest places. How seeing with the heart matters more than seeing with the eyes. How giving someone a chance can change not just their life but yours. How the bravest thing you can do is to love someone the world has decided is not worthy of love. And how the most powerful thing you can do is accept that love when it is offered. Their great-grandchildren would play among the vegetables and flowers, never knowing hunger, always knowing love. The ranch would continue for generations, known throughout Nevada not just for its prosperity but for its values. And in the small cemetery under the cottonwood tree, two headstones would stand side by side, bearing simple inscriptions. Russell Enders, it read. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he saw with his heart, Penelope Enders. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she loved with her whole soul. Between the two headstones, their children planted roses that bloomed year after year, red and full and fragrant, a living testament to a love that death could not diminish. Visitors to the ranch would often find fresh flowers on the graves, placed there by family members or by townspeople who remembered, or by strangers who had only heard the story but felt moved by it nonetheless. The story of Russell and Penelope became part of Unionville's history, told to newcomers and passed down through generations. It became the story mothers told their daughters about waiting for someone who could see your true value. The story fathers told their sons about looking past appearances to character. The story that made cynics believe in love and reminded believers why they believed. And on summer evenings, when the light was just right, and the breeze carried the scent of roses and sagebrush, people swore they could feel it, the love that still lingered in that place, as real and powerful as it had been when Russell first took Penelope's hand and promised to cherish her for all his days. A promise kept, a love honored, a story worth telling again and again forever.